former city.
Former city. Were you a banker?
I was, and a lawyer.
And a lawyer. You've done a lot. Yeah, we're ready. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us in the Conservative Home tent this afternoon. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, I hope. We've got some fantastic panellists, so I'll introduce them. Baroness Barron is going to be joining us, but just a little bit late, so we'll get her take as soon as she arrives. Hopefully she won't be too much longer, but we'll get started. So I'm Emily Carver. I've been a columnist at Conservative Home for a couple of years, and I really enjoy writing for them. Fantastic publication. Do read it if you don't already. We have David Limburg, who is CEO of Retail Banking at NatWest Group. Let me get a little bit more of you. You've been there since September 2020, and you've worked in all sorts of different roles: commercial business bank, chief product and digital officer, all sorts of things, and worked with various charities. We also have Lee Middleton, who is the CEO of the NYA, which is the National Youth...
Professional body for youth work.
There we go. Thank you very much. Sorry, I forgot the acronym. Thank you very much for joining us. So we're getting your view on all of the fantastic work you do too. Where are all of my lovely names? Here we go. We also have Baroness will be joining us soon. And on my right, Bim Afalami, MP, who was first elected in 2017. Hitchin and Harpenden is his constituency. He was re-elected again in 2019. He's worked in the city. He's worked as a lawyer. And crucially, he is the chair of the Financial Markets and Services APPG. And to my left, we have Toke Adekanola, who is a NatWest Thrive Rising Star. So we look forward to hearing all about your experience. You're only 18 years old, so it's fantastic for you to be on the panel. So we're talking today about how to help young people become financially resilient and achieve their aspirations. That is a huge topic, and it's something that is being discussed across party conference. Young people, I think, have had quite a lot of hiccups over the past few years. It's been tricky, lots of obstacles. We've had the pandemic, disruption to education. Of course, we have a housing crisis. And there's quite a lot of insecurity for young people at the moment, not knowing which path to go down, lots of options when it comes to education. But a lot of young people don't know which way to go and how to ensure that they do have that financial resilience, which is so important as we live longer, and how to ensure that young people have it and feel confident with their finances. I really do think that's very important indeed. And I, for one, don't think young people are taught enough about it at school and through the education system. So let's see what our experts have to say on the panel. David, would you like to start by... well, really giving your take on that question, really. How can we help young people become financially resilient and achieve their aspirations when it comes to their career?
Sure, and I think that we'll be talking about essentially only that for the next hour. But, I thought I'd just take a step back and when you listed all the things that have gone wrong in the last 4 years, it's exhausting. But having said all that, if you go back a year ago and you said, well, how would I feel about things? I would have said I was really quite worried. I was quite worried because suddenly we were going into the first real sense of inflation that most people alive had worked through. We were going through incredible rises in interest rates. We had a week where interest rates rose by almost 5%, which is pretty unprecedented, and you had an incredible, almost crushing, you could argue, crushing debt burden on everybody who owned a home. You had petrol prices skyrocketing and the like. So there really was quite a lot to be very concerned about. And I have to admit, as I sit here today, I would say the worst of our predictions have not come through. And it turns out that this economy and most people in the economy have been more resilient to some of that than we thought they would be. And one of the big reasons for that is I think we've had quite a lot of good government support and have helped the lower end of society cope. I think wages, particularly private sector wages, have really increased more than we thought they would, not quite keeping up with inflation, but have come some way. I think having had pretty conservative lending practices by and large across the economy has helped. And what we've begun to see, particularly over the last 6 months, is we've seen households really change the way they behave. They're spending a little bit less. They're spending on different things. They're being quite thoughtful around where they save, saving in many respects more fixed-term products than they had in the past. So I guess the first thing I'd say is all these horrible predictions haven't quite come true. And if you looked at the bad debt line of an average bank, it's roughly where it was in 2019. That's the good news. The less good news is that, but nobody's really thriving. And if you look at house prices, if you look at people's proclivities to invest in homes, if you look at businesses' desire to invest, it's pretty much at an all-time low. Just to give you a sense, mortgages are down 30% this year from where they were last year. Buy-to-let is down almost 70%. I mean, these are extraordinary numbers. And a lot of people saved a lot of money during the pandemic. We're now seeing that money being spent. So people who used to have quite a lot of money in their current accounts, and just to give you some data, and I like my data, a roughly 17% decline in current accounts across the country this year, which is absolutely unprecedented. You would say that could almost not happen. It would almost be impossible, and yet that's exactly what's happened. So the less good news is nobody's really doing well. And I guess the bad news is if you look below the averages, there's two groups of people that have done very, very badly. The first is those that I'd categorize as vulnerable to begin with, those on the lowest incomes, those who have some sort of neurodiversity, those who are in situations of unemployment originally or some abuse situations. If you looked at our charity partners, they would say it has never been so bad for that group. But the other group, which is maybe more surprising, is young people. And young people are doing less well than they ever have. In fact, we do a study with the Prince's Trust. And young people are doing less well in their view today than they ever have before, including the day after the global financial crisis. And 46% of young people today are saying they feel hopeless as their current financial situation makes their lives feel hopeless. So it is a real issue. I won't go into all the things that we're doing, but where we are right now is to say there's lots of financial education that we've always invested in. Money Sense, I think many of you hopefully would know, we've been doing for 30 years. Career Sense, we're building on that. But what we want to go to now is a combination of the work we're doing as a part of Thrive with the NYA, and that is up right there, and that's the acronym, trying to bring together financial capability with mindsets, which is what you've brought in, Lee. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And then finally, to bridge the gap, there's a big gap between a financial plan and financial habits. And there's an awful lot I'd love to talk more about around how big data and over time AI can support our ability to help people move from a financial plan to fundamentally changing the way they spend and the way they save to their benefit. I might stop there, but there is a lot of exciting work in the area.
That was great, David. You started off with a positive, then you had some negative in the middle, and then back to positive, looking forward to the future. Lots to say there. Now, Lee, apologies for that terrible introduction earlier. You are recognised as the most senior youth worker in the whole of England, and you're also an advisor to the UK Government and Commonwealth Secretariat, so thank you very much. Now, your perspective on what David's had to say there, but also generally, how can we help young people? How are you helping young people? What works?
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a really unique opportunity to talk to you and explain how a big corporate organisation and a charity that's focused on young people comes together to explore the needs and challenges that those young people face. My difficult statistic, which is slightly different, but similar. So the Girl Guides just very recently, in those few weeks, published a report that showed that 75% of young girls were worried about money and financial resilience and their future and how they're going to manage their money in the future. NYA is the professional body for youth work in England, so we support youth clubs and youth projects up and down the country. It's probably around 6,000 youth clubs, but also Scouts and Girl Guides and all sorts of other uniform groups as well. And along that way, we talk to lots of youth workers, lots of practitioners, and importantly, an awful lot of young people about their experience of life. And what we know is young people consistently say there are three things that are on their mind. The number one is their mental health and well-being, but financial worries is really high up on what's causing that poor mental health well-being. That's triggered by the cost of living crisis, which is the second thing young people are really worried about. This is not been, as David sort of touched on, not necessarily been an equal crisis across the country. That it has hit young people far harder than it has hit others, and it's hit communities with increased levels of poverty harder than it's hit other areas. And one of the things we love about the Thrive programme, working with Marcus Rashford, is taking his story about what made the difference in his journey. Now, I guess, okay, he's an incredible football player, but actually, forget that. he started in a council house, single-parent mum, and the one thing he said that would have made the difference to him was having the financial support, was having the ability to manage his finances better, understand money, understand how saving for that rainy day, you know, just literally putting a few pounds away each week can actually make a big difference later on. And what we've taken, and so the third issue that young people are focused on is around their future and their future jobs and income and what that income is going to look like. And bear in mind, your average, about 80% of jobs an 11-year-old might go into is yet to be invented. So that is a really stressful, worrying time. If you've no idea where you're going to go, unless you're going to be a lawyer like Toke's looking to do, or a doctor where, you know, it's fairly clear that has to be a profession. But AI, invention of digital, the way the world is moving, it's really complicated for young people. So I guess, and then the pandemic, again, was a crisis that hit young people far harder than many others. Everybody rightly was worried, was focused on a medical crisis. And for older generations, that was absolutely the right thing. But for young people, this was a social crisis. It was switching off their ability to go and connect, go to youth clubs, go to scouts, go to their local youth project or, you know, sports projects, whatever it is. And sort of leaving them at home with not so much education at the same time, because that was all switched off. So all the things that young people, we're all social animals, right? We want to enjoy ourselves and have fun, and the pandemic hit those young people very hard. So what we're trying to do at the National Youth Agency is to invest in frontline support for young people, what we would call youth workers, but trusted adults, and that can come in any form you like. From, you know, if you think back to, there's usually someone in our childhood, that one adult that really got us, invested in us, that inspired us. And our mission is to make sure that every young person in the country has access to a trusted adult, a youth worker that can inspire them and support them. I think there's some really interesting things around the Thrive programme. The Thrive programme was a bringing together of, I say, NatWest and the NYA's expertise, but also engaging young people. We co-designed this whole programme with young people. But we turned financial capability sounds quite dry. We made it fun. And we created activities and workbooks and all sorts of things that young people could do in youth clubs, in social settings, and we made it fun and engaging and interesting. And just to give you an example, 98% of young people say their financial confidence has been improved as a result. And 88% feel more confident about work and their education as a result of doing that. And what we've really, you know, what schools try and do around financial education and maths lessons, etc., and budgeting, is quite dry. What we do in youth club settings is we make it great fun. We make them run around, do lots of fun and games, write stuff on balloons, do all sorts, you know, literally scribble on the walls, and make it really interesting. And NatWest has been brilliant working with us around, it's the youth worker, it's that trusted adult that knows how to make the difference to those young people. And what often happens when we've been involved in financial capabilities programs for a long time, but what often happens is the corporate writes the check, the charity employs a group of people, they go in for 6 weeks, they run a load of workshops in the school or wherever, and then they go again. And that has that makes a benefit, that definitely makes a benefit. But what Thrive is very unique is what we've done is we've invested in existing youth workers who are in the community. So youth club down the road has a youth worker, and we give them the tools, the training, and maybe a grant to assist them. And we trust that youth worker who already knows their young people. They've already got those relationships. We let them get on and do the job. And because it's their trusted adult, their youth worker who knows them really well, young people thrive, and hence the name.
And clearly you're getting absolutely tremendous results. Thank you very much. Bim, I'll put to you, how can we help young people become financially resilient? Is it all about confidence, having the tools to be confident?
I mean, the first thing is we've got to identify what we mean by young people. I think it's important to do that as part of this conversation. I'm going to define young people as really anybody younger than me, because that is...
How old are you?
I'm 37. And that is quite a good way of thinking about anything, if you're as self-centered as I am. But it is also relevant because when I left university was 2007. It was just before the financial crisis. And I do see a big difference between people who left university or left school before the financial crisis and what has happened since that time. And I think it's useful for us to think about that as a framing. So broadly speaking, in all seriousness, we're talking about people roughly under 40 or maybe even under 45. And because in an aging society, they count as sort of young, because our country as a whole is getting older and older. What do I think is the problem, the headwinds? Now, I won't repeat what many people have already said, and I agree with what they've said. I think that the broader macro-financial environment has been terrible for younger people in a period of time where asset prices, houses being the most obvious one, have gone up by so much, and yet average weekly earnings of the median person, not the mean, right? If you go back to maths from school, not the mean, the median. So the middle person, the average weekly earnings are about the same as they were at the time of the financial crisis. Just think about that. And then think about how much more rent or mortgages or the actual cost of a house is, how much that has grown since the financial crisis. Okay. And then we wonder why young people are having a tough time. So I think that the most fundamental thing we need to do, and to be honest, I think that because of the rise in interest rates, inflation, the chaos over the last couple of years, economically, I'm not talking about political chaos, we can talk about that separately. But what that has meant is that that will now start to affect the cost of assets and the cost of housing and all the rest, but that will take a long time to play through. So in essence, young people have faced an incredibly challenging outlook if you don't have wealthy parents, which by definition most don't. And we have to start by recognizing that. So, bearing in mind that's the context, what do we do about it? Two things in particular. The first is, look, I love tax cuts. I'm very fond of them. I often make speeches saying how much we need them. I believe it. However, when we talk about things like tax cuts as a party, who in this room counts themselves as a conservative? Hands up for a sec. Disturbingly few at Conservative Party conference. Anyway.
I thought it would be more than that.
So did I. Come on, guys, don't be shy. You're amongst friends. As we talk about tax cuts, we need to focus them on younger working people. If, in particular, people who are graduates now are paying a really high marginal tax rate, far in advance of what younger people should be paying, if they have any hope, bearing in mind the context that I started with, if they have any hope of realizing their own aspirations, right? So I think that's the first thing we need to do. We need to focus tax cuts. I know we can't do tax cuts all the time, and the fiscal situation is difficult, but when we are thinking about that, we need to focus it on those people. First point. Second point is we need to be much more aggressive at using the government to do good and actively benefiting and policies benefiting younger people. And I'm afraid that the broader political environment and society isn't that interested in younger people. They say they're interested in younger people, but decisions are constantly taken with an eye towards older people. So what I think we need to do is, the government can't control the whole global economic context. Governments aren't that powerful in that sense. But in our own country, let's tilt the playing field in favor of younger people. That is, let's make it easier for businesses to provide mentoring. Let's be more generous on things like the Help to Buy ISA and those equivalent things, so to help people get on the housing ladder. Let's cut their taxes. Let's make it easier and think about it all the time, because the headwinds faced by younger people are very significant. And so that is the framework within which I think we should look at this. And if we do that, over time, we can improve the outcomes for younger people.
Bim, are you disappointed then that the conversation has been more about inheritance tax than
I think
the tax burden on working people?
Yeah, I mean, look, I said this yesterday at something. If we are a Conservative Party that wants to grow and build aspiration, getting on in life, having a go, and prizing that and celebrating that, it's odd if our tax priority would be effectively would take money out of currently, because if somebody's got lots of money and they're a retired person, at least some of that they may well be investing in small businesses, or in this country or elsewhere. In effect, if you allow them to save much more on inheritance tax, guess what? Money will be taken out of the economy. So we take money out of a dynamic economy. We put it more in the hands of wealthier families when tax rates for younger working people are too high. I'm all in favour of raising the thresholds of inheritance tax, I really am, but not until we have reduced the tax burden for younger working people.
I'd be interested to get onto student finance a little later, perhaps. But Baroness Diana Baran has appeared. Thank you very much for joining us. You are the Minister for the School System and Student Finance. Thank you very much for joining us. Can I put that? Are you ready? Excellent. Let me put the question of the day, which is how can we help young people become more financially resilient? It's difficult context at the moment. Lots of young people are finding it difficult to get on. Living standards impacted by inflation and difficulties over the course of the pandemic. How can they achieve their aspirations? What needs to change?
Well, big question. So I guess maybe I'm too glass half full, but I also think there's unparalleled opportunities for young people. So we know that youth unemployment is pretty much at historic lows, and there's a whole raft of opportunities in sectors and areas that young people care about, in particular in relation to green skills and everything that goes with that. So I absolutely accept and recognise that young people may feel anxious, but actually I think it is beholden on all of us to spell out the opportunities that there are for them. And I think there are sort of different elements to this, and obviously schools play a part, but employers play a part, and the youth sector, I'm looking at Lee, obviously I'm far enough away maybe to risk not acknowledging that, but no, I won't even try. And the youth sector plays an important part. So I think in terms of the school system, one of our jobs is to make sure that we give young people quality qualifications that allow them to access really good jobs, whether those be, if you like, more traditional academic qualifications, but also making sure that our skills offer is, you know, inspiring, attractive, and extremely high quality. And that's behind reforms like the introduction of T-levels. That kind of links then very obviously with the role of employers, because clearly, specifically with T-levels, there's a major work placement, and that is a chance not just for young people to get exposure to the workplace and understand all that that brings with it, but also gives employers the chance to build their pipeline of staff and at a really early stage. So we think it's a kind of win-win for both. But of course there'll be young people who have incredibly well-networked families and who can get them lots of work experience and so on, and then there are others who don't. And I think that's particularly where youth provision can play a really important role in building the confidence of young people to try something that maybe is a little bit outside their immediate frame of reference, but where they have a natural interest and natural gift. So I don't know how much that answers your question, but that's a kind of shape of how I would see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Toke, you are our young person on the panel, and you're also the NatWest Thrive Rising Star, which is fantastic. Now, you came to the UK when you were only 13, and now you are about to start. Have you already started? Yeah. You've just started your higher education journey at Bournemouth University studying law. So why don't you tell us a bit about your experience with NatWest, a little bit of how you see the situation for young people when it comes to financial resilience. Are young people, does it ring true with you that young people are frightened of the future, that they're frightened that they're not going to get on, that they're not going to own a home, that they're not going to have enough money to get by? Tell us.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to say I think it's really important to hear from an actual young person, so thank you for having me.
I used to be that person. I still remember what it was like.
Okay, so I'll say, speaking from personal experience, before I participated in the NatWest Thrive program, I definitely feel like I had a lot of anxiety around my future and especially finances, I think. It's not being fully alleviated yet, but I think I'm definitely in a better headspace right now. From my experience and also hearing from my peers, I know there are a lot of fears around actually knowing what we want to do and knowing if especially for people who want to go into mainstream careers not STEM. I was speaking from someone who went into humanities. I know there's a lot of conversation around it not being lucrative, and I definitely had fears about that because I know I'm not a STEM person. So I was wondering will I succeed because I'm not a STEM person? So I know a lot of my friends definitely had that fear, and I did too. I think for now I'm feeling much more confident, especially after the NatWest Thrive program, because I feel like I was able to I was given hope, and now I know I have options. I mean, I just started, I've been a week in school now and I'm enjoying it, so I have hope for my future. I think right now, especially with the cost of living crisis that we are in now, people from my background who aren't really high earning, this will definitely ring true with them. I know the sentiments have been echoed around young people feeling less confident around their finances, and I agree because obviously personal experience. I just think that, and one thing that I want to point out majorly is just a lack of, I think, access and opportunities. And I know it's been mentioned that there actually are many opportunities, but I feel like how do I explain it? I feel like it's quite hard for a lot of people, especially if you don't have connections to actually get these opportunities, because there's so many, but some young people, a lot of us just don't know how to access these. And I guess I'm one of the few people that actually do, because I'm here right now. This is an opportunity that I don't think I would have gotten in my life. So, and this was only accessed for me through youth work, which I think is one very important thing that is looked over a lot. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Very interesting to hear your experience. I remember when I was your age, I was terrified about what I was going to do, whether I'd achieve anything, whether I'd make any money, and it can be a very anxiety-inducing time of your life. I'd like to go to hear from David and Lee a little bit more, really, about what you're doing exactly. Let's dig into the detail a little bit about how you deal with, how you see young people. What if you have a young person and they are very worried about their future? They don't know if they're going to manage to get a job. They don't know which path to follow. What sort of advice do you think those young people need to hear in order to build up that confidence? To you, Lee.
Shall I go first? I think, just that you have unlimited potential, and that it's within you and your grasp to find your path. I think the number one thing I would say to any young person is, find your passion and follow that, because I turned my hobby into my career and I've loved every day of it because of that, and I'm good at it because I'm invested in it. And I think for so many, I think as Toko brilliantly said, it's about finding the support and the opportunity to be able to thrive, to be able to take those opportunities that others might have that you may not. And what we're trying to do is to level the playing field for all young people, or as many as we can, to give them the opportunity to have that, to engage, to find the help that they need. The Thrive programme, there's actually 3 parts to our work with NatWest Thrive. So there's the Thrive programme with Marcus Rashford, where, as I've said slightly before, we give small grants, we give tools and resources, and this large crate turns up with lots of fun and activities in it, and we train the youth workers in how to use it, and then they go off and they run 6, 8, 12 sessions, but they run it in their own time. They can run it over the period of time that group of young people can engage with it. So you might want to do it in one hit and do it in a week, but you might want to run it out over 3 months, 6 months, and that works fine. What works for young people, and then we kind of analyse the data from that. David, we're obsessed with data too, just understanding the difference and the impact of that. And with 83% of young people tell us just by doing 4 sessions their well-being is improved. We've made a difference, and that makes us feel good. The second part to Thrive is a difficult statistic, I guess, is that in the last decade we've lost £1 billion a year of spend on youth services. Mm-hmm. So when we were talking to NatWest about this programme, I slightly cheekily just sort of said, well, what can you do to help youth workers and the sector in general? So it's great that we can do this for young people, but is there a thing we can do to help youth workers? Because if we've got really good youth workers who are well supported, they'll go and help many other young people in many other ways. And I said, well, and what that came down to was NatWest has donated millions of pounds of its apprenticeship levy funds to us, so we can train youth workers at degree level, and that's just completely unopened to so many practitioners, and that's fantastic. And then the other part was, well, actually the bank has got 80,000 staff who have got amazing skills in marketing and HR and legal, and could they volunteer their time to support their local youth project? And we're now matching bank staff and expertise. The kind of classic CSR of, well, we'll go and paint the wall in the village hall. There's like 30 layers of paint on most village halls' walls these days, and it's not needed. But actually, use your expertise to come and help charities and groups that need help, and you really make a lasting difference. So NatWest is wrapping itself around the youth sector, and to wrap itself around young people, which is just unheard of in many ways, and is remarkable. So so we use youth workers, right? We use people who really understand young people, who have that relationship, who run activities in a fun and engaging way. And I can't stop saying fun, because life is really quite stressful and quite difficult, and actually we're all just looking for a bit of enjoyment, a bit of light relief, and to go and enjoy ourselves. And if you're with your friends, if you're with your peers, building massive towers out of whatever to learn about how you add up and use money and plan and budget things, you take a really, really, really important set of life skills. And it's not just about financial capability. Young people are learning to negotiate. They're learning project management skills. They're learning how to work as a team. So all these life skills that you then take into the workplace, you move, which help you in your next steps. So many employers have told us that it's less sometimes about the academic qualification coming out of school, college, university. I can give them those skills. I can give them that knowledge. Yeah. I need young people in my workforce in the future who can connect, can engage, can relate with each other, who can problem solve, who can just get on and be collaborative. So what the Thrive programme is doing is giving those youth workers the tools to work with young people. And I mean, Toke is a phenomenal example of amazing young people. I want to give you one example. So one of the other young people that went through the programme, a gentleman called Tiger, the bank said, we did a pilot, and the bank said, let's invite the young people to the bank's headquarters, this great glass palace down in London. It's a phenomenal place. And these are kids from housing estates, from, with young people who don't always have the opportunities in their family networks, etc. And one of them said, how do I come work here? And 3 months later, they've got an apprenticeship, and they're going to be working in David's team, I think, isn't it? In one of the
there we
branches.
go. That was going to be my next question. I'll put this to David. What does success look like?
Right. Well, I mean, I might try to build on that, and you said it already well. And Toke, I think, is doing a great job. She's first-year law. Is that right? Yeah. It was wonderful. And at NatWest, we've been paying an awful lot of lawyers lately, and I think you're going to be just fine. But it is true. And Bim said something really interesting, which was just how difficult it is with house prices for young people to get on the housing ladder. The statistic, if you are not in the top 5% of wage earners and you're a young person under the age of 35, you are unable to buy a home ever. Those are the statistics right now, and it's a horrible situation. We have to do something about it. I would agree with Leah. I think it is about confidence more than anything else, because once you have the confidence, you start to take the steps to build your future. Let me give you a sense of where we are, what we're trying to do, and I'll steal a page out of your book. Who here considers themselves in one way or another to be a NatWest customer? So a few more of you than conservatives. That's
It's good to,
we could
see.
We could form a
What the
coalition.
rest are you doing here at Tory Party conference? I think there's shy Tories out there. We're going to rely on those next year.
Well, there are probably some shy NatWest customers too. But so I don't know if you know this, but in the last 6 months, 49% of students that chose a bank chose NatWest, and 23% of young people that chose a bank chose NatWest. And we are absolutely focused on young people and focused on supporting young people to get to where they need to get to, which we think is a massive issue right now. And we think about it in educational ways. So we've run for 28 years now something called Money Sense. It's in 60% of schools. Many of your children may have taken it. Many of you may have been exposed to it. We've run Career Sense. So we do the educational piece. We've matched up on Thrive. And Thrive is really combining education with this mindset. And I think, frankly, we'd missed the whole importance of mindset to all of this. And that combination is very powerful. And then that's face-to-face. And we've discovered face-to-face is so important, even though we consider ourselves largely a digital bank today. But where it gets really exciting is we no longer consider ourselves to be a product company. We're a services company, and we're in the service of young people trying to build better financial futures. So every one of your children today who's a NatWest customer, free of charge, you can use Rooster Money, which is 17 to about 14, and it teaches good financial habits. But where we're getting to is then services that help you, things like know your credit score, so that's free of charge. Things like, at the press of a button on the app, you can round up every single thing that you buy to the nearest pound, or double that, and suddenly you wake up and you have real money saved at the end of every year. And once you've got, the view is nobody cares about saving until they have savings. Once you have savings, you start to care about savings, and so building those habits.
Do those savings stay in the saving pot, though? Because I remember I used to do this rounding up stuff, and I used to just take it straight back out of my, I enjoyed it as a sort of gimmick.
Well,
and is it actually something, if you look at those people's pots at the end of the year, has it actually stayed in there?
Well, we find that journalists are a bit unique as it relates to spending out of their savings, but we looked...
It was so cold. It was so cold. So
This is what I like, a little bit of a fight.
We actually looked at it, and I think the stat is at the end of each year, the average customer saved £500.
Okay, well, that sounds
for
good.
a young person, it doesn't feel like you're saving, and suddenly you have it, and then so it does work. But where we're going to get to is, and in about a year or two, where this is where the industry is going to be, which is every single person will have logged what their goals are. And based on what they save and what they spend, we'll be able to nudge people in the direction of their choice. So, because it's not about having a plan, it's about having habits. And to me, it's around using, big data and AI is unquestionably going to be used for good, and it's going to be used for evil. But our job is to try to apply it. We can't stop it for as much good as possible. I think this is going to be absolutely groundbreaking as it relates to changing people's financial future. So stay tuned, but this is going to be a pretty exciting area for us.
Good stuff. Bim.
And I apologize.
Bim, you are a free marketeer, free market-minded, conservative MP.
red-blooded and free.
Presumably... What did you say?
I said red-blooded and free.
Red-blooded and free marketeer, and only 37 years old. You must love seeing businesses and charities working together. It gets the government off the hook.
I mean, I think that I'm surprised that somebody as free market as you regards the government as owning everything, and the government sort of subcontracting out things to the private sector. I believe that things start in the private sector. They start with people, with communities, and only when those things cannot be realised should government intervene. I believe in that way round. I do think it's worth... I was at lunch with somebody today, and they were making a point that we don't actually talk enough, I know it's painful, about the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic had on this country. We've talked a little bit about young people here, and that's, by the way, very relevant, the impact on young people. But in particular, the impact on our society. The way people think of their responsibilities, the responsibilities of government. And I do think something very profound has happened where, because of how, I suspect it's because of how the government stepped in during COVID, and look, mistakes were made, but I think broadly speaking, people did support most of those actions at the time. I think that now there is this expectation that government is the starting point for all problems. Government must fix them. And where that leads to is a lot of spending and a lot of tax and a lot of borrowing as well. And you don't get the outcomes that you want. So the best way to get outcomes is in as localized and as personal a way as possible. That's why I think work like the NYA does, and I've really enjoyed listening to the work that you do. I didn't know anything about what you did before, so I've learned a lot, and thank you for that. What they're doing, what NatWest is doing as a very big institution, I think it's fair to say, but is trying to almost make sure that you're not seen as a big institution, almost you're a small institution in a lot of places. I think that's important. So really, this is a good model for, we should have hundreds of things like this going on all over the country. That's not saying NatWest needs to do them all. I'm just making the point that that way round is better than a world where we say something isn't right, government must fix the problem, government come in with your scheme to fix everything for everybody, because they rarely work.
Diana, would you agree? Because the government is often criticised for not investing enough in youth services. People point to the austerity years, and they say, you know, this is one of the things that has let young people down. Not enough money from government, from the taxpayer, going into these type of services. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, we don't need to rehearse the kind of austerity arguments, but I think that government is still the major funder of youth services. So to your earlier point about government being off the hook, government isn't off the hook. I mean, government is a major funder of charities, particularly larger ones. And I think that what we've tried to do, and I did previously have some responsibilities in this area, is really focus our funding on those organisations which we believed were having the greatest impact and could have a kind of ripple effect across communities. So we did work closely with the NYA and looked at qualifications in particular and funded work there to try and raise the quality of provision. But that is not to kind of squeeze out of the market, so to speak, smaller, more organic, local organisations. But I think there is a sort of to stay on Bim's team, there is a knee-jerk reaction, which is more money is the answer to everything. And in lots of cases, it can help, but in many cases, it definitely isn't.
To what extent do you find, with things you've been involved with, whether there could be almost a crowding out effect? So you end up with a position where government funds something, and even that third sector organisation gets used to government funding it, loses its capability to raise money itself because the government's funding it. At some point, for right or wrong reason, the money is pulled back or it's reduced. To what extent do you find that government money often can actually end up, in the long term, being actually harmful? Whereas what government should be doing is helping enable local communities, local people, often local government, to fix a lot of the problems. Have you seen that happen?
So I suppose I would look at it in a slightly different way. I mean, I think, yes, all of that happens. But I think the real thing is, and I'm looking at various people I know in the audience who run charities, and they're all looking at me, but I genuinely believe, having run a charity myself, that I ran a domestic abuse charity, and at one point we had 65% of our funding from the Home Office. You can't be an independent organisation, in my opinion, this is speaking as a charity chief exec as opposed to a government minister, but I still think the same. You can't be truly independent if all your money comes from government. And if you are there to stand on the side of the people you're supporting, and sometimes government's part of the solution, and sometimes government's part of the problem, if all your money comes from government, I think it's very hard to be an independent advocate for those whose voice you are trying to represent. Others may disagree with me, but so we intentionally took that right back down because we felt we needed some relationship with government, but it should never be above a certain percentage. I think the other thing, which I think is tricky, and we're going off financial anxiety, but a different sort of financial anxiety, I think there are a lot of examples, and I understand why, where not-for-profit organisations have moved away from service delivery and only do advocacy, and that advocacy is mainly criticising the government, and yet they are heavily funded by the government. I think that's a weird... and
The
not
government
very-
is paying them to bash the government.
I think it's not a very healthy dynamic. So that, but anyway, maybe we should get back to financial anxiety.
We're going to get to some questions from the audience in just one moment, but I just wanted to ask you one last question, Toke. How much do you hear about people complaining, your age, about the student finance system? Because, yes, many more people are going to university these days, so someone's got to pay for it, but it is getting quite cripplingly expensive for people, and you essentially have to pay a tax for many years after you leave.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so so my flatmate, for example, I know that he has to pay, I think, for like our rent. So his student finance only covers, only covers like about half of our rent, or even less. He has to pay, I think, $700 out of pocket from like him working like on the weekends. And while I'm like fortunate enough to have it actually cover all of my rent, I know I have to have like a really tight budget. Like I know I can't like go out and, order, food or whatever. I actually have to have like a strict budget to take care of myself. I think, I don't really know like what exactly could be done to like improve like
How it works.
Yeah, how it works. Yeah. But I know that like with people around my age, it is like a big struggle, especially because of the whole system, like how it's calculated. Because I know that despite like it being seen as like fair, so many people are still at a disadvantage because they still have to pay for a lot of things out of pocket. And I mean, this ties back in with NatWest Thrive. I'm going to tie back in. But personally, I think because I attended the program, I now have, like, I've been able to, think more deeply about my finances. And I think, for example, even with my budget, I'm able to still put in some money weekly into the Lifetime ISA I opened. So I know so many other young people actually can't do that. So it's not like a thing that I think there needs to be more help to young people. But I think encouraging young people to attend youth programs that are put on by, youth groups and, businesses like NatWest is really important. Because speaking from experience, it really helped me. Like it's helped.
I mean, that's fantastic that you're already putting money away into a Lifetime ISA. When I was 18, I certainly wasn't thinking about that. I was probably overdrawn most of the time, but there we go. That's fantastic, and that's the sort of advice that gives you confidence for the future, knowing that you're going to have that little bit of money building up over the years. Right, let's get some questions from the audience. Wow. Okay, should have left a bit more time for that then. Let's get these two ladies at the front first, and then we'll pick up some more.
The audience, the Conservatives are finding their voice.
Is this on? I can talk really loudly if not.
If you want to, can you say where you're from?
Yes. Hi, Alicia Walker, Centrepoint.
Thank you. That was a really interesting discussion, and thank you especially, Toka. It was really great to hear your perspective and to have a young person on the panel, so thank you so much. I have multiple questions. I'm going to try and focus on one. But actually, I'm really interested to know what you see as the role of advocacy in pushing this forward, because actually I think we veered into an interesting conversation about the role of the charity sector and how we can support moving this forward. And actually, I was reflecting as you were talking, it feels as though the argument has been made. We understand the problems in the charity sector, we do a lot of research, we understand all of the issues, and often in terms of advocacy, I think we do think we've got to turn up with all of our stats. You know, I've got some reports in my bag. But actually, if we know the facts, we know what the problem is, we know what we want to do to move things forward. And Bim, I wrote down what you said. Hold on. I'm not writing fast, but don't worry. It was, you need to tilt the playing field in favour of young people. Yeah. And I think that's absolutely what we say at Centrepoint. In terms of advocacy, if the argument's been made and the stats are all known, how do we do that? What's the most effective way, as people advocating for young people, to do that?
Okay, fantastic. Should we take another question?
I am from New Horizon Youth Centre, similarly work with Lily with young homeless people. I have 3 numbers, a plea and a question. I was just going to say that there are 129,000 young people who went to their council as homeless, but we know the true scale is double that. These young people are expected to exist on, what's your number again, £4.90 a month after their benefits payments. A lot of these young people are working full-time. We have young people in our centre who are sleeping on the streets and going to 12-hour care shifts. They are students, they are parents, they are responsible members of society, but they cannot achieve their aspirations when they are being fundamentally told that their labour is worthless and their aspirations are worthless, whether that's through their benefits payments, their minimum wage, or the kind of opportunities that are available to them. And my plea is these young people are amazing. Our centre is a really good place to be, and they are still so positive about what their options are. But please, please, do not take the lesson that because they manage on that, that is resilience. I refuse to accept that that is a level of resilience that any party could be okay with when young people only get a meal that day when they come to our centre after they've done their uni lectures. Like, it is not resilience, and we need to do better by them.
What's your centre called, sorry?
New Horizon Youth Centre is based in London.
Centre. And can we get a third question as well? This lady there.
Hello, my name's Laura Weldon. I'm the parliamentary candidate for Pontefract, Castleford and Nottingham as of this Thursday.
Congratulations.
Firstly, Bim, I just turned 38 a month ago, so thanks very much for classifying me as old. Appreciate that. But I also sort of recognised a lot of what you said, being a similarly frustrated millennial. In the last couple of weeks, a bill's been passed which has increased the auto-enrolment age for pensions right down to 18. When you're going to be putting money aside that you're not going to save for another 40 years or so, it may go up as well, how can young people not see that as anything other than a tax? And couldn't we do something instead around allowing young people to put things into a lifetime ISA? Tucker, it's amazing that you've got a lifetime ISA. I wasn't thinking about it until 10 years ago, maybe. But couldn't we do something about the lifetime ISA where young people can actually access some money that they're saving for important things, not just buying a house, but things like extra education, qualifications, maternity leave, things like that?
Yeah, thinking about other things, not just housing. Bim, do you want to answer that one first? Because it was directed to you.
I think it's a point very well made. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that we should have a system where when people are saving for the long term, yes, auto-enrollment makes sense, but let's be a bit flexible, because at different points in your life, you need different money for different things, right? When you're obviously in, say, your 50s or your 60s, you're thinking about retirement, but if you're younger and say you've got young children, you don't save as much because you're spending more on young children. I mean, that people go through different phases, and I think that having flexibility really matters. So I think that's a point very, very well made. Just on the first 2 points, on New Horizons point, love to talk to you about the detail of that, because that seems intuitively very odd to me, that people are working full-time and can't afford somewhere to live and eat. I mean, that strikes me as very odd. And the point about advocacy, look, this is going to sound old-fashioned and boring, but unless younger people see the mainstream political process as one that they should really engage with, their voice isn't going to be heard as much as it should. It's not just enough to turn up and vote, whatever way that is. That's actually not enough. I used to think that. I used to think, oh, well, what we need to do is, we need to get young people to vote and all the rest of it. Actually, because of the nature of the electoral system, young people tend to live they tend to congregate, so in cities which tend to have sort of overweight labour, or when they live, for example, if they're living at home, which may well be out of cities, there are not enough of them to make a significant difference. So what often happens is that young people's voices are not very clearly heard. So I'd really, really, really urge you to have more advocacy, not through the charity bashing the government. And by the way, I'd say that if at the next election it was to be a Labour government, I don't think that would change my view at all. But actually to think, how can we work with both major parties to really make sure that our voice is heard? Because if you look at the Blair government, 97 to 2010, particularly the Blair phase of it, a lot of the changes that were made to tilt the playing field in favour of older people were done on the back of years and years and years of work by charities that were advocating for elderly people and saying that elderly people, their poverty rates were higher than working age people. And they changed it through that.
That's true. Does anyone else want to come in on those? We've only got a couple minutes left, so would anyone like to come in on one of those points? Yes, Lee?
Yeah, I can come in on a couple of them quickly. I think the difference is helping young people to thrive, not survive. And I think that's the difference. So it was interesting, the Chancellor today's announced an increase in the living wage, or that's what the media's been talking about. I didn't see his speech, sorry. But actually, a young care leaver at 18 has the same bills as a 25-year-old, but gets less on the terms of living wage. They have the same food, the same rent, same electricity, same travel costs. And so the system's rigged against the young person in that sense, because in any other measure, you'd pay them equally because they're doing the same work, same thing, and yet they don't. So it's about how the system... And actually, I kind of agree with some. I think the job of government is to set the conditions in which everybody gets to thrive and get out the way if you're when you're in the way. And I've seen that done in a few places actually, where government can be really powerful at setting something up and then getting out. And I think that's really important. I think the advocacy point that was sort of coming up. I guess as a national chief executive of a national charity. We have to think quite differently about how we use data and insight and what have you. And actually working with the likes of NatWest and the vast amount of data intelligence that we can gather with the funding and the support and using the advocacy that the bank can support us with allows a different dialogue with ministers, and that dialogue will be heard in different places and spaces. So it's about being quite clever about how you utilise that. I used to meet Diana, I don't know, every month probably, when she was our youth minister, and very careful not to give her too much of a hard time. But actually, you need a range of sources, a range of information, and you need to know your facts. And what NatWest Thrive able, for us, for example, allowed us to have a ring-fenced resource that works with a specific group of young people, of which we measure it incredibly in depth. And because of that, I can then extrapolate that up and say, well, if we could roll this out from a 1 million programme to a 10 million programme, we could achieve X, Y, and Z. Government, if you helped us with the skills to do this, and this, we can make that 20 million. And you have to sort of try and play that sort of narrative.
Well, sadly, I think that's all we've got time for. Yeah, that flew by. Sorry we didn't get to speak for longer, but thank you for your contributions. Fantastic. Let's say thank you to David Lindberg, Lee Middleton, Bim Afalami, of course, Toke Adekanola, NatWest Thrive Rising Star, and Baroness Diana Baran, MBE. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Lovely to see you too.
Well done. Thank you so much.